Madam Parliamentarian.
Mr. President, I move that ordinance 20-20 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin.
Yes. Will the clerk please read by title and synopsis?
Ordinance 2020 to amend Title II, Administration and Personnel of the Bloomington Municipal Code to establish a Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance is authored by Council Members Piedmont Smith, Rosenbarger, and Flaherty, and amends Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code, Administration and Personnel, to create an 11-member Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission. This commission would, among other duties, research and make recommendations to the Common Council and the Mayor on matters of public safety. The committee recommendation is to pass 103.
Thank you.
I move that ordinance 2020 be adopted.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, I think, is the lead sponsor on this legislation. So I would like to ask you to present the legislation. And then I believe Councilmember Sims is the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and he will give a report from the committee. So Ms. Piedmont Smith, would you please go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is a proposal brought forward by Council members Rosenbarger, Flaherty, and myself to establish a CAPS Commission, Community Advisory on Public Safety. So to put this into context, as City Council members, we need to be able to represent all the people of Bloomington from various demographic groups. And we have heard that there are some demographic groups that don't have a seat at the table, or we know that there are some demographic groups that don't have a seat at the table when making decisions about public safety. And I'm going to have to adjust my screen because I can't see all of the, okay, thank you. So the City Council context is that we are here to represent people of Bloomington. There's some demographic groups that we haven't heard from on matters of public safety, even though issues of public safety affect them greatly due to various forms of bigotry, prejudice, and systemic bias. And that's why we propose the formation of the CAPS Commission as a venue to hear these voices and specifically hear their recommendations for improving public safety in our community. So another way to contextualize this is the idea of public safety, and that has come to the forefront, of course, of many people's minds in the last 6 months. And some members of our community have expressed to us in emails and conversations, through petitions, in public meetings, that they do not feel safe. At the same time, the Bloomington Police Department is increasingly asked to address problems outside of law enforcement and is overworked as a result. Nationally, there's increasing recognition that law enforcement is being asked to deal with social problems, and this is not working. Public safety, we recognize, is much broader than law enforcement or policing. The goals of the Community Advisory on Public Safety Commission are, number one, to hear from people who've been left out of the discussion about what public safety means for them and their loved ones, how we can improve public safety with the tools we currently have, what new tools or services could we add to make our community more safe. And we would hear from members of disenfranchised communities through commission members. They would not be representing the communities, but they would be in the best position to reach out to people who have similar life experiences and get their feedback. Continuing with the goals, number 2 is to review programs used successfully in other communities and see if they could be applied here in Bloomington. In addition to the members of the commission, community volunteers could help with research upon request of the commission. And then when some ideas do rise to the top, the CAPS Commission would reach out to the relevant city departments and or other agencies to explore how we could implement these ideas in the city. Goal number 3 is to discuss new local ideas or adaptations of programs that could improve public safety. So in addition to programs that have been used elsewhere, there may be versions that we might consider here, or there may be new ideas that bubble up to the top. Goal number 4 is to report to the City Council and Mayor's administration in time to possibly incorporate new or expanded tools for public safety into the budget request for fiscal year 2022 and future fiscal years. And goal number 5 is an ongoing evaluation of public safety in Bloomington, with annual reports to the City Council and the Mayor's administration. And we expect the Commission to monitor and evaluate actions taken based on their recommendations to see if progress is being made towards public safety goals. So the Commission appointments would go through the same process as appointments to all other boards and commissions in the city, or most others. They go through the City Clerk's office, either through the online forms, the onboard system, or via paper application forms. And I have talked with the Clerk Bolden about this, and she agrees that paper forms could be accepted as well. And council members and staff can work with social service agencies to make these paper forms available and to collect completed forms to return to the clerk's office. So we would have to do some additional outreach, I think, to get applicants to this commission, because some of the demographics that we're seeking to hear from are people who may not have access to internet or computers regularly. And then once the applications are received, it would be the City Council's Public Safety Committee that will review the applications, would conduct interviews, and then make recommendations to the City Council. And as always, the City Council would vote on the appointments. Preference will be given to those who have lived experience as members of demographic groups that are often marginalized in our society. For example, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ and non-binary individuals, people who have experienced or are currently experiencing homelessness, domestic violence, or mental health problems, addiction or other, people with disabilities, people who were previously incarcerated. And we recognize that we may not find individuals from these groups who are willing or able to serve, and therefore we would also consider appointments of people who advocate for these demographic groups. And please note, there are 11 seats on the commission, but we do not expect to check off, okay, we have one person from this demographic, one person from that. That's not the vision at all. These are just examples of groups that we would like to have represented. It depends on who applies. And of course, we recognize there's a lot of intersectionality between these different groups. So the duties really reflect the goals that I mentioned earlier. So the duties of the commission would be to gather data about perceptions and preferences regarding public safety, specifically from racial minority, economically disadvantaged, and marginalized residents of the city. The commission would research evidence-based approaches to public safety, focusing on those approaches outside the scope of traditional policing. They would explore best practices in socially and racially just public safety measures in other cities and examine which ideas may best be implemented here in Bloomington. They would make recommendations and provide an annual report. And then there is an educational component. We would ask them to have some outreach events to promote a broader view of what public safety is and what it means to different people. The duties would not include any role in oversight of Bloomington Police or any other law enforcement. Staff support for the commission will come from the City Council office. And I've had a couple of conversations with City Council Administrator Stephen Lucas, who assured me that the staff does have capacity to take this on. And as I mentioned earlier, volunteers could be called upon to help with doing some of the research and carrying out the commission's work. So there have been a lot of questions about how this commission is the same or is different from the recently announced task force on the future of policing that came out of the Divided Community Project that some in the mayor's administration and in our community have participated in for the last, well, almost a year now. So here we have put together a chart that compares the two. So as I said, the CAPS Commission is to gather data from members of marginalized demographics. They are supposed to research approaches to public safety beyond policing. They will explore best practices other than traditional policing to accomplish public safety. And they will promote a broader view of public safety through education and outreach. On the other hand, the task force on the future of policing, according to the proposal that we have seen and discussed with Beverly Callender Anderson, their main goals will be to evaluate the Bloomington Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, and IU Police Department practices and protocols, to identify best practices in policing, and to research other communities, law enforcement agencies, advocacy groups, to get at creative, sustainable law enforcement practices. So I've highlighted some words here to indicate that the CAPS Commission is really looking at non-traditional, approaches that are outside of the realm of traditional policing or law enforcement to address public safety. Whereas the task force on the future of policing, as you can see by the name, is very much focused on law enforcement. And I think these are both very valuable groups and entities, and I'm pleased to see the task force on the future of policing being formed. But they have different goals. And I think it's very important that both groups participate in getting to our common goal of improving public safety for everybody. So there have been questions from my colleagues about why this should be a commission and why it should not be a task force or a focus group. Or I guess the question is, why not make it a task force or a focus group instead of a commission? So here I've just kind of lined up the comparison. A focus group is not in our city code anywhere. And the definition is that it's a small group of people who respond to something like a product or a politician. And their response is then studied to determine the response that could be expected from a larger population. So it's you start with an idea or concept and you're showing it to these people to see what their response is. A task force is also not defined in city code. The dictionary defines it as a temporary grouping under one leader for the purpose of accomplishing a definite objective. So it's kind of a discrete amount of time and one certain objective that you're trying to attain. A commission, and this is really what I think fits best with our goals for the CAPS Commission. A commission is in city code. There are many commissions through the city of Bloomington that are described in Chapter 2 of the Bloomington Municipal Code. The dictionary definition is that it's a group of persons directed to perform some duty. And I've reviewed the duties that would fall to this commission. And we really think that the commission is best because it has the commitment of the city behind it. If we tonight as a city council decide that this is a valuable goal, that these goals are worth pursuing. A commission is really a formal way to say, we value it so much, we're going to put it in our code. And a commission, unlike a focus group, commission comes up with its own ideas and its own recommendations, whereas a focus group is really just kind of reacting to somebody else's ideas. And as we see by the many other commissions we have, Commission on the Status of Black Males, Tree Commission, Environmental Commission, Commission on Sustainability, city commissions typically can determine for themselves how best to achieve the goals in city code that are laid out for them. And that's really what we want this commission to do, because we want those underrepresented voices to tell us how we can best improve public safety for them and for everybody. We also had some questions from colleagues about measuring success. What would success of this commission look like? So in the short term, we would have a reporting of public safety perspectives and data, especially from marginalized residents. And we would have some recommendations based on both local input and the research of evidence-based public safety measures. And these could be very helpful in informing our future budgets. In the longer term, improvement in public safety outcomes is what we're after. And in the long term, I think we can expect increased perceptions of safety among marginalized residents so that they feel safer, reduced racial and socioeconomic disparities in policing and carceral outcomes, because now we do know that there are disparities in arrests and people going to jail. And also, over time, we can see a reduction in crime rates. And that would definitely show that what we're doing has had a positive impact. So we reached out to many different organizations while we were creating this proposal. I won't read them all out, but you can see them here. We really wanted to talk to people who work with people who are often disenfranchised in our community and ask their opinion about whether this commission would be a good way to help them in the realm of public safety. So these are not endorsements. Some of these organizations did get back to us. Some of them did not. None of them said it was a bad idea. I have to give credit to Councilmember Jim Sims, who reminded me how important it is to reach out to the NAACP. So they are on that list. I did talk to the president of that organization. And so we did try to reach out to many advocates for the people that we hope will serve on this commission. So I do want to, before I read the conclusion here, I did want to mention that it was brought to our attention the end of September, early October, that we really should have reached out to Black, Indigenous, and people of color earlier in the process. And so I just want to acknowledge that I accept that criticism. I think I apologize that we did not reach out earlier to the Black and Brown communities in Bloomington. We did reach out to some, but I understand we should have done a more thorough job in getting those voices heard early in the process. I think that seeing that the goal of this proposal is to hear those voices, I hope that can be accepted as a worthwhile goal, even if we did not originate the proposal with Black, Indigenous, people of color at the very outset. So in conclusion, the commission would be a venue through which we can hear voices of marginalized communities in Bloomington on the broad issue of public safety. The commission would be comprised of individuals who have lived experience, They will not represent any agencies or any demographic groups, but they will know best how to reach out to others with similar life experiences. This input will help the City Council to make policy and budgetary decisions to improve public safety in Bloomington in the long term. So I thank you for your time, and I don't know if my co-sponsors would like to add anything. I will stop the screen sharing at this point. That's the end of my presentation.
Do the co-sponsors want to speak?
Not at this time, but I'm happy to answer questions from council members.
Councilmember Rosenberger? Okay. We'll go now to the committee report from Public Safety, the Public Safety Committee. Councilmember Sims?
Thank you. Members of the Public Safety Committee, Council's Public Safety Committee, besides myself, is Councilmember Sandberg, Scambolari, and Piedmont Smith. This legislation was introduced on October the 21st. We've had two standing committee meetings, October 28th and November the 12th. I do believe that this report was included in this week's addendum as part of the packet. But in these meetings, there was much robust discussion. I will add that. Part of what we talked about, the commission would, the proposed commission would, among other duties, research and make recommendations to the Common Council, the mayor, the Board of Public Safety on matters of public safety. It goes on to say that the commission would be advisory in nature with the goal of increasing safety of all members of the Bloomington community. During the November 12th meeting, there was an amendment that was offered by the sponsor, and that amendment was passed, and it approved the ability to evaluate the need for the efficacy of this proposed commission 2 years after the commission's first meeting. So it was approved to be part of the ordinance 2020 as amended. Moving on, there was much discussion focused on the needs to hear the voices of marginalized people in the Bloomington community and the importance of hearing from those lived experiences. We discussed concerns about the role of the commission in the community and how it would work with other social justice groups, including but not limited to the Future Policing Task Force, the Board of Public Safety, the Stride Center, and the Racial Equity Task Force. Council members expressed concern about how all the groups would work together, duplication of efforts, and whether it was more appropriate to call the proposed commission a task force or a focus group, and the need to consider areas and issues that play a role in public safety, but are the purview of our county colleagues. Very robust discussion. The due pass recommendation, as stated by our clerk earlier, was 103. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to note that Councilmember Sims pointed out that there was an amendment. We will have to introduce that amendment, but I'd rather start with questions from members and then we'll go to the amendment. So are there any questions on the ordinance as presented? We'll start with Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you for the presentation, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. I wondered if you could, we've discussed a little bit about the role of council staff and what that might mean in terms of commitment of an individual or individuals from the council staff. Could you talk about your estimation, just in terms of FTE, what you think that would require?
Well, I think it's a little difficult to estimate. I think at first there won't be all that much time required, but once the commission establishes what they want to delve into as far as research, that's probably when staff time is going to be highest during that research data gathering phase. I find it difficult to hazard a guess at this point. Do one of my co-sponsors have an estimation of the staff time?
I might suggest that you direct the question to Mr. Lucas.
I can certainly weigh in if council members like. As Councilmember Piedmont Smith stated, it's hard to estimate, not only because the scope of work that the commission may take on is a bit of an unknown, but also the capacity of the commission members themselves to perform research and do any writing or help create a report. I've noted to the members who have asked about this that council staff in the past has helped with things like the Peak Oil Task Force, the Affordable Living Committee, the Urban Deer Task Force, and has helped provide both research and administrative support to those groups. So to the extent that this proposal is in line with those past efforts, I know this is a commission and those other groups were more time limited. This is in line with work that council staff has done in the past. One thing I did note to the sponsors is that unlike those groups, this is a commission, and at the moment doesn't have an end date. So depending on the scope of work and the ability of the commission members to take on some of that work themselves, I don't see an issue. But again, it really depends on a number of variables.
I'll briefly chime in response, if that's okay.
Please do.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, I think some of it will have to be determined based on need. And I had a conversation with Councilmember Smith not long ago, where he, I think, astutely identified that we have a lot of capacity for research support through volunteers, potentially through the IU community. And I know in previous meetings, specifically folks who were among those community members specifically requesting a commission like this through petitions that this council has received, and others have posited the same notion that potentially through research groups or sort of more, research-based community intervention-based coursework that there may be the possibility to leverage volunteer opportunities with the university community as well. So just wanted to mention that as another possibility.
And may I add something?
Go, please.
I also wanted to point out that we have Becky Bustiani, who is now at 32 hours per week, which is, well, it's a relatively new position, and its hours have increased in the last couple of years. So compared with the period of the Peak Oil Task Force or the Deer Task Force, we actually have quite a bit more FTE available today than we did at that time. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. My question has to do with something that I've thought about since our two subsequent meetings, and that is, why is this not the same kind of commission as we normally do when we are in joint partnership with the mayor's office, the administration, providing certain appointments to a commission and city council providing the other? I know a lot of the discussion was about that this isn't just about policing, but a good many of the questions and input that came from the past public safety committee meetings were certainly about the Bloomington Police. And that department is, of course, under the purview of the mayor's office and his executive function. So my question is, why would this not be a joint commission like all of our others? Why is this specific to the city council when the recommendations from this body are going to go to mayor's office as well as council?
Please go ahead, Mr. Flaherty.
I think because a lot of community members have asked for it for a start. I know other communities around the state of Indiana have also looked at various types of council-centered bodies to look at different aspects of public safety. I think in some ways it's because unlike other commissions and boards, when it comes to the Board of Public Safety, which does actually have a different purview, though at least they're both in the same realm of public safety, that consists entirely of mayoral appointments as well. So I think that's at least part of it, that's in reaching out to community members. That's what a lot of folks felt was needed and asked for. And I think it's kind of a unique situation in the realm of public safety as compared to some other areas based on the structures of other existing entities.
Again, so is there a specific reason why the mayor's office would be left out of this appointment?
I think I just answered that. Did I not?
I didn't get that. Again, this is unique to any other commission that we have in our system. So what's the difference? Why not have that multi-layer representation when it comes to making policy that this group could possibly be recommending?
Well, I think certainly there would be some consultation, and we've spoken to that. I just mentioned that there's also a mayor-only appointed board in the context of public safety, and that a lot of community members who have asked for the council to look at and study and develop policy in the realm of a more holistic view of public safety and kind of transformational approach, that has been the feedback we've gotten. So I don't think I'm opposed to a different structure necessarily. I think that was just the natural starting point. So yeah, I mean, if I wish this had been brought up sooner, frankly. That's all.
Further questions on Ordinance 2020? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I do have a question, but the first comment is I would state that the discussion on the mayor-only appointment board, which is the Board of Public Safety, is dictated by statute, by law. So I just want that to be clear. That's not a choice, that is law. But in the presentation, Councilmember Piedmont Smith gave a list of organizations that had been contacted. I didn't count the number. I don't know how many there were. I'm guessing 10 or 11 or a dozen. And then the comment was made, or the statements, that we tried to get feedback from these organizations. Some responded, some did not. I guess in my discussions last week as well, I think I noted about 22 social service organizations that are out in the community that are advocates for many of these populations that we that you're discussing this evening. I do remember getting a letter from the Bloomington Homeless Coalition, and I thank them for that input. But I would have felt much more comfortable getting a much broader perspective from many of the organizations that do advocate for these populations. My question is, how many of these organizations were attempted to be contacted prior to the formation of this legislation? And were most of these contacts after the fact? I guess I'm wondering why there was no prior contact from the affected populations to help form this legislation in the first place.
Who would like to address that? Councilmember Rosenberger?
I'll start with that. So my answer would start with all of them were contacted before a draft of this ordinance was created. I would say we had a meeting and we made a list. We had a meeting with a Word document about the idea for this commission, and we made a list of organizations we wanted to talk to see if others were interested or thought this was a good idea. So I would say we did not send a draft of an ordinance. We did not have a draft of an ordinance to send to any organization when we reached out.
No, my concern was, were they reached out to gather information and input from them before drafting the legislations, which I think would have been helpful, would have been much more comfortable with that. And as was noted, there's several that weren't. So I was just wondering the process.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I would say that, let's see, there are 12 on the list. 11 of them we reached out to before we wrote the ordinance. The NAACP, I apologize, I did not reach out to them until after we had a draft. So I do apologize for that. When writing legislation, I think it's, and I know Councilmember Sims, you know this, but it's impossible to reach out to everybody who maybe has a view on, or an educated view on the topic. It's very difficult to, everybody is extremely busy, especially in social service agencies, especially during COVID. It's just a gargantuan task to reach out to. You said there were 22 agencies. So I don't know. I mean, how many agencies did the mayor reach out to decide who to appoint to the Board of Public Safety? How many agencies do we as council members reach out to when we decide to make appointments to the Environmental Commission or to the Commission on Sustainability or the Commission on the Status of Black Males? We can all use more input, but there's only so many hours in the day and there's only so much input that we can gather to make decisions. So I don't really understand why this commission, which really is not geared towards having representation from agencies, but rather geared towards having individuals serve with lived experience. I don't know why it is crucial to have agencies involved in writing the legislation. I understand why it would have been better to have people from our Black and Brown communities more involved in the writing of it, and I've already acknowledged that. But expecting us to reach out to all the agencies that touch upon these communities, I think is a very difficult request.
Mr. Sims.
Just acknowledging that I could continue. And my response, if there is such a response as part of this question, is when I just would have, this was individually, I would just felt more comfortable at the presentation at the beginning if it was more representative of advocates. I didn't say organizations represent folks, but they advocate for certain populations. And I just would have been more comfortable hearing from that. And my question, one of my questions is, there are multiple organizations that work for the Black population, African-American, Brown people population. And if some of them are not contacted, then I think one can understand the perception in the community that there's legislation that quote unquote may affect them, but they have not been involved in their input in that until after the fact. In some cases, not every organization, but many. And that also leads to the perception of being saved, if you will. And some of the responses I've heard from many members in the community is that they don't particularly need saving. They want to participate and be involved, which they weren't at the beginning. So that was my point. And I guess I would ask, what say you to that?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, the point of this commission is to create a venue, an avenue for people of color, for people in other marginalized groups to tell us how we can improve public safety in our community in a broad sense. I'm not a white savior saying, this is what we must do to create public safety. I don't know. I particularly do not know from a perspective of the Black and Brown communities in Bloomington. I want to hear them. I want to hear them. And this is the mechanism by which we can create legitimacy, have a commission say, we value your voice. And so we're going to create this commission. And please apply and please be part of it. And please go to meetings and give us your views and your expertise. So I guess that would be my response, is we're creating the mechanism by which to hear those voices.
I would add something to that if that's okay.
Mr.
Councilmember
Flaherty and
Sims.
Mr. Sims.
Just to note that I don't think Councilmember Piedmont Smith intended this, but I don't think a commission is necessary to legitimize voices or anything like that. I think, but I think I just agree with the point that the notion is to set up a structure to gather input in a more formal way than the committee meetings we've already been having and emails from constituents we've been having and petitions we've been receiving and that sort of thing. So it's just to create a more formal process by which to gather input.
Mr. Sims?
Thank you. I just kind of want to get to the gist of the legislation itself. The proposed commission states that there's 11 positions that would be appointed, and I think there were 9 that were tentatively identified. Am I incorrect on that?
Ms. Piedmont Smith?
What are the 9 that you're referring to? We didn't identify any particular slots for any.
And I think it said it could include, and then there were several groups listed.
Right.
Blacks, Latinx, mental health, physical disabilities, those are what I'm referring to.
Yeah, those are just examples of demographic groups that have been underrepresented in making policy on public safety. And they are not slots that we have to check off. Okay, we have 1 Black person, we have 1 Latinx person, we have 1 person with mental health problem. No, that's not the idea at all. These are just examples of the type of lived experience that we want to hear from.
Thank you. That was not my insinuation. I was just wondering the makeup of this commission. And I noticed that of those examples, and maybe this was, I know it was an unintentional omission, but I heard no mention or saw no mention of the indigenous population and the Asian population. Will that be included as we move forward? Should this commission be approved?
Yes, as I mentioned, these are just examples. And I think in other parts of the legislation, it says minority groups. So any of those other non-white groups would certainly be included, yes. And as you say, perhaps this was an oversight on our part, and it would have been, I would have loved to hear, hear that earlier, and we could have corrected it with an amendment. But yeah, I think that the language is broad enough that they would certainly be included as people that we want to appoint to the commission. We legally cannot restrict who applies or who is welcome to apply. Those are just groups, any minority groups, and the groups listed are just the ones that we particularly would encourage.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm not insinuating restrictions. I think as we talked earlier on, my whole point has been inclusion, full inclusion. My last question is, and the Asian population could be or would be considered a minority group. And I guess I'm asking, were there any Asian advocate organization contacted as part of this legislation as well?
I don't think so, not specifically. I wanted to mention actually in people of color, I believe includes people who are have an Asian background or indigenous, of course. Those are all included, I believe, in people of color. So
thank you. I understand intersectionality. I was just asking about contact and folks' input and being included prior to all this. Thank you very much.
I'll respond briefly.
Clarity.
Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Mr. Rello.
Could I just ask, since we have an administration committee meeting scheduled for 9:30, how are we proceeding?
The committee is scheduled to after the council meeting is over. It's immediately following the meeting. When we scheduled the year schedule, this night was specifically contemplated because Thanksgiving is next week. And so we put the committee night the same night as regular session. It is to immediately follow. So it's going to be following this meeting.
Would the 10:30 rule apply?
I mean, certainly the committee would have to vote to see whether or not it would want to actually meet and deliberate. Yes, it would apply.
Thank you.
Mr. Flaherty.
I just wanted to mention that I think part of the gap maybe in how we're thinking about this is Councilmember Sims, your question seemed to be very focused on organizations or institutions or agencies, and I think that just wasn't the approach that we as co-sponsors took in communicating with constituents and residents. For me, this was a very resident and constituent driven thing, and I did speak with Asian American residents in Bloomington about the need for this, and as well as other BIPOC residents and leaders in our community. But those were mostly done on individual bases, based on hundreds of emails that we received this summer from folks and people who've come to constituent meetings and other folks that I've just had interactions with in the community who I reached out to. So I think the gap of not, for instance, including an Asian or Asian American advocacy group in outreach to decide whether or not it would be a good idea to hear more from people is a bit of just a difference in how we chose to approach it, talking to individual people versus taking a sort of organization-centric approach. Certainly, I appreciate it if that's what you think the best approach would have been. I think it's just not the way this was approached. So that's, I think, part of the disconnect here.
Okay, I'm going to ask for more. Thank you. I'm going to ask for more questions here, but before we go to public comment, I mean, if there's no other members with a question, Mr. Smith, at some point I will ask a member of the administration to give us their feedback on the proposal, but I'll go to Councilmember Smith first.
Thank you. I think that I did a lot of reading on different commissions and how public safety is addressed around the nation. And so 3 questions kind of formed in my mind. And one of them is, how do we decide to form a commission? How do we decide to do that as council members in the city? And another one is, do I think the purposes or goals of the CAPS Commission cannot be achieved without being a commission? And I don't think that's true. And I also wondered, can the CAPS not form by selecting its members, selecting its leadership, developing some relationship with stakeholders, and request a commission status later after the group has evolved some of the functions that, in my mind, that's part of the reason why I am not likely to support it.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
And so I guess, yeah, the central question is, do I think the goals or purposes cannot be achieved unless it's a commission?
Is that a question? Is that the question?
That's a question out loud to
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith or Councilmember Flaherty or Rosenberger.
Well, I have a few responses to that. First of all, Councilmember Smith, you said that you thought maybe a group could go ahead and form on their own and then request to become a commission. I do not know of any commission in the history of the city that was formed in that way. And, correct me if I'm wrong, people who've been around longer than me, but commissions are formed because the city and the city council and the mayor have a priority to hear to gather people together to address a certain issue. Okay, so we have the Commission on Children and Youth, we have the Women's Commission, we have the Environmental Commission. These are initiated by the city because we prioritize those issues, because we see that there's information that we're not getting that we want to hear from commissions about. I do not think that a commission has ever been subsumed by the city that was somehow some independent body to start out with. Okay, so that's for a start. And then I honestly do not think that we can get the results, the impact, the input that we are seeking from people who have traditionally been marginalized in our society without having a commission as the structure. I think that perhaps an independent group could be formed, but they would have significant structural hurdles to overcome. They would not have any paid staff to help them to organize and to write reports and to take meeting minutes. It would be quite burdensome for community volunteers to take on this task on their own. And they would have no standing with the city to present their recommendations. I mean, we've talked a lot in the committee meetings about, I would listen to people no matter what form their suggestions held. But I think it is another level of structural legitimacy if we have a commission that we are asking to look into public safety, to then, since it's our commission, we take ownership of that. We take ownership of this issue. We recognize this issue is important to us, and we recognize that the voices of those communities are important in our decisions. It's making a statement. And so that is very important, I believe, especially in 2020, when we've seen so many communities torn apart by issues related to public safety. I think it's time that we take a stand and say, this is important, and we want to listen to people who are not at the table.
We do have task force in the city, though, that are connected to and give input to the city, right?
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but yes, certainly in the past we have, and there's been a proposed one. Yes, what is?
Well,
that going?
I'm just saying, I take your what you say about commission, but I'm still not convinced that it can't do what it needs to do without being a commission. I mean, for instance, should we have a commission on homelessness in Bloomington? Perhaps. Should we have one on recovery and substance abuse? Should we have a commission on that? Probably. Should we have a commission on child trafficking? I mean, there's, I don't know where you've been on the council definitely longer than I am, and I'm just trying to work through these issues in my mind that I don't know where the line is, or how we decide what a commission is or what it is not, and when we need one and when we don't, and all the goals of the CAPS are just wonderful. So you and the other members who sponsored it, it's public safety in a broader sense needs to be discussed and brought forth. But
well, let's say for comments. I mean, if you have more questions, we'd like to move to questions.
Sorry.
I appreciate that.
Thank you,
Before I
Isabel.
go to staff, is there any other question, first round question? If not, I'd like to ask a member of the administration to speak to the ordinance. I see Beverly Callender Anderson, Director of Community and Family Resources. on the screen. Hello.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Volan. Yes, I'm Beverly Callender Anderson, Director of the Community and Family Resources Department. And I've spoken to this proposal in the two previous Public Safety Committee meetings. And I'll sort of repeat what I said at those, that hearing the voices of people who have been marginalized and that I think is very important. And I think it's important, A, that we say that these are people that have been marginalized. They didn't marginalize themselves. However, well, so I think that's very important. And I think that we should be doing that not only in any new commission, but on all of our commissions that we do, that we have. And that it's 32, 36 of them now. One of the things I did want to address that Councilmember Piedmont Smith said was about how commissions are formed. I've been with the city under the formation of 2 new commissions and the reformation of one. The old CFRD commission is now the Commission on the Commission Status and Youth. And I've been here for the formation of the Commission on the Status of Black Males, as well as the Commission on Hispanic and Latino Affairs. And none of them were formed automatically by proposal. There was research that was done, there was data that had to be gathered. We had to come to council with evidence that there was something missing that a commission could fulfill. And it wasn't that we came to the commission and said, oh, that, as a department, and it wasn't the city, it was the community that came to us and said, Black males are being underrepresented in employment. Black males are being discriminated against in law enforcement and education. And they brought the stats, and we formed a task force, and they found the stats, they did the research, and then we presented the evidence and said, this is why this commission needs to be formed. So that happened with both Commission on Status of Black Males and Hispanic and Latino Affairs. That being said, I will say that it probably takes a good year to year and a half for a commission to get its feet up under it. And so I know that there's a plan to try to evaluate in a year. I mean, it takes at least that long for the people to jail, for the people who don't want to be on a commission to get off because they find out that it's too much work or it's not what they expected it to be. It's not, these people come together and automatically start working, and have something out in 3 to 4 months. So even with the Divided Communities Project group, we've been together a year, and it has taken time for us to form as a group. It's just part of group process to form as a group. So that is not a criticism as much as that is voice of experience. But to speak directly to the proposal, I am so supportive of hearing the voices of more people. But I'm also aware of things that we've heard, like you're creating a new table when there are tables already created that maybe we should be reaching out to. We are trying to bring people into a process that may not be their process or their way of normal communication, and trying to force, square pegs into round holes. That is something to think about. And as late as this morning, I heard from some public safety officials just about the confusion that all of the different committees is causing in the community. So for that reason, I think I would keep the mission, keep the goals of CAP, but rethink the structure. I think the goals are good. I think the structure leaves something to be desired. But that's my opinion. And anything that we can do, and I do appreciate Councilmember Piedmont Smith's illustration of putting CAPS and the future of policing side by side. There are some different goals, but there are some very, very similar outcomes that we're looking for, and that's the safety of our community and our community members, and all of our community members, not just some of them, not just people who already have a seat at the table, but those people who currently have a seat want to be safe, as well as those who do that you don't feel have a voice, and maybe they don't feel they have a voice. But I would counsel the council to allow everyone to have a voice and to take every voice as serious as if it were a commission, if you're a task force, if you're an individual, if you, however that formation happens, every voice of a resident should be as important, and it shouldn't have to fit into a particular structure to be legitimized. And that's all I have.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, did you have a reply?
Oh, I was going to ask whether Ms. Callender Anderson is speaking on behalf of the mayor's administration or just on her own behalf.
I'm speaking on behalf of the administration today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg.
I have a question for Ms. Callender Anderson, if that's allowed. With respect to, did I see an email, was it today, that your group is actually looking for council appointments to perhaps reach out to some of these voices that we're discussing today?
Yes.
Could you kind of summarize that email that I saw this morning?
So the Future of Policing Task Force has asked for recommendations for membership from City Council, from Monroe County government, and from the IU structure, not just IUPD, but from IU, because we realize that public safety for our residents is going to involve all of those entities, and there are a lot of public safety agencies that cross over and have to be collaborative and communicative with one another. And so I was late in getting that invitation to council, and I do apologize. I've had some family issues, but yes, I did send that invitation last week.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to, is there a response from the sponsors? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Flaherty, I think, had his hand up before me.
Mr. Flaherty?
I have questions for Ms. Callender Anderson, actually. I'm not sure when that's
Okay, well then we'll go to
so
questions.
yeah, go
Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure. I think I appreciate that email, Ms. Callender Anderson, and your comments here. Sorry, I have a dog occasionally barking in the background. And I appreciate that invitation to the council. I think I'm curious why it didn't come 6 or 8 months ago, and why the council wasn't involved in helping as representatives of the community, as elected officials, to develop some of the goals or directions, because we did ultimately, as you know, have a couple of conversations over the last 6 weeks or so about what the co-sponsors of this legislation were looking at based on the feedback that we'd heard from hundreds of constituents and residents over the course of the last 6 months. And of course, some other work had been going on in tandem with the Divided Community Project, but council wasn't informed or involved with that. But at the end of the day, those kind of took different paths a little bit. The Future of Policing Task Force, by its own words and proposal, is very focused on law enforcement best practices and that aspect of public safety. Whereas what's proposed in this legislation is sort of wholly different as a matter of subject matter, really, and policy, looking at things outside the criminal legal system. So I guess I think I initially asked a question, then kind of went on. My question is why the council wasn't involved, many months ago, in the spring, for instance. And then I guess a follow-up question is, if a commission isn't the right fit to tackle this subject matter, could or should the Future of Policing Task Force and the proposals brought forth by the Divided Community Project be scrapped as well and revisited with broader input from elected officials?
So, Councilmember Flaherty, as you know, the Divided Communities Project is a group that we have been working with for well over a year out of the Ohio State University Moore School of Law. Mm-hmm. And it involved the Bridge Initiative as well as the Academy Initiative. And the Bridge Initiative, I don't know, and I can't say because I wasn't a part of who got selected to be interviewed. So I don't know that there were council members that were or were not interviewed, but this has been an ongoing process. This is not something that we just came up with. While we were working with the Bridge Initiative, we were invited to bring community members to the Academy. This is not, it was not to be necessarily a city group. The Academy is a separate initiative from the Bridge Initiative. The Academy puts together a group of city residents with different backgrounds to form a committee that will work to address and be prepared to address community unrest or any kind of potential community unrest. And so based on the demographics that we were given by the Bridge Initiative, community members were selected. City Council was not one of the demographics that was on that list. And so so as to why you weren't, there's no reason why you weren't involved as opposed to why were the people who were involved. And it was because that we joined together with 4 other communities at a training session, and we were all working on crises or potential crisis situations in our communities. And one of the reasons I think they wanted community members is because there were members of the community in different segments that would be very influential with the larger community. And this would not come as a top-down government kind of piece, but it would come from the community itself. And so when we left the Academy, we left the Academy with a set of goals because that was part of the process. We left with a set of goals that we were working on. And as we came back and this group has continued to meet, like I said, we have been working together for over about a year now. As we continued to meet, part of what came out of that was the development of 2 task forces, not commissions that are ongoing, but task forces that will come up. And maybe one of the recommendations, I can't say, will be to form a commission. I don't know. I don't know what these task forces will come up with, but they will be resident-led and resident-driven, not city-led or driven. We are going to provide staff to one, and IU will provide staff to the other. And that's just how we move forward. So I don't know that I have a good answer to your question about why City Council wasn't involved earlier. City Council was certainly informed because there were lots of media releases. We had a video done. There were reports that were submitted. There were reports in the paper. And so there were a lot of ways for council to know about the Divided Communities Project and to know about what we were doing. To your point of should this be scrapped and we start over, I say no.
Okay, I guess a quick follow-up, if that's okay. I don't mean to discount the work that's been done. My concern is that we are elected representatives for this community, and we have heard a lot of feedback from many, many, many people. And my concern is that the task force proposal and some other and related things, that like the goals are already defined, and I and all 8 of my colleagues are tasked with developing legislative policy for the city by virtue of our elected positions. And when the goals are already defined to how we're going to approach challenges in public safety, it's hard to do that. So I guess that's where I'm having difficulty.
So when you say the goals are already defined, you mean the goals of the Future of Policing Task Force?
Correct.
Okay. Because they're defined by community members. They are defined by the people on this, on the Divided Communities Project.
Who chose those people?
Well, I sent you a memo earlier. You asked that question, and
it was
and as I told you, as we turned around that application, we provided we listed people that fit into the demographics of that. It wasn't and to answer the underlying question, it was not the mayor or the mayor's office. There were 2 staff people that were tasked with completing the application to the Academy in order to get accepted. And as we looked at the demographics that they submitted and said should be on every team. We went through people we knew and that had been active or and asked various people to serve.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask one question to follow up on that, but it sounds, Ms. Keller Anderson, as though somebody chose, I see 7 names here. 3 of them are you, Mary Catherine Carmichael, and Chief of Police Mike Dekoff. So they're 3 city employees. They're basically department heads out of the 7-member task. And you're saying the other 4 were chosen?
Yes. So they asked for a high-ranking, government official. They asked for, and I'm assuming that's Mary Catherine. I don't think I'm high-ranking.
Okay.
They asked for the police chief. They asked for, clergy. They asked for people from various advocacy groups. And I think I listed it in the memo in the response that I sent. And so that's how we got to.
Oh, I see it here. 2 representatives from municipal infrastructure, 2 representatives from the local nonprofit community, 2 community advocates, a member of a religious organization, and a representative from an educational institution.
Right. And so and one of the things, I don't know if it was in my response, but we had a clergy person that had to drop out at the last minute. And so we had to substitute someone. And so a local artist and LGBTQ advocate, we added in there. But that's how it.
Okay, well, I mean, like, I see how this came together. Like, I understand that the goal of the Divided Community Project, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results that the task force that you've assembled and you've defined is doing. The one thing I would ask simply, though, despite it's the way in which it was generated, is it not reasonable to characterize the Divided Communities Initiative and the task force as having been created essentially from the top down? I mean, it's not that it's a problem, but it is a top-down creation. I mean, it was created from an initiative at the top.
It was created from an initiative from an outside consultant organization.
Okay.
The Divided Communities Project is out of Ohio State University. Yes, we engaged them as consultants with the Bridge Initiative initially. Right. And so, yeah, I think you could call it that. They were engaged by the office of the mayor. And then we found out about the academy piece of it through that work. So
yeah, the administration is doing what the administration is supposed to do.
That's fine.
I get that. It's just that, some of the questions from members are characterizing this as the commission proposal as somehow a top-down commission proposal. But I mean, if that the racial the task force, I lost the title of it, on the future of policing rather, is by definition a task force being created by the top down. Is that not also?
No, the future of policing is a task force being created by the members of the Divided Communities Project. Now, whether or not, if you want to say that the Divided Communities Project Academy team, if you want to call that top down, it's not.
I mean, if it was created by that team, that was created from the, as a.
I mean, I understand how you're getting where you're getting. I think I just don't agree. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I just,
But I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
May I respond to Ms. Callender Anderson's?
Yes, and this will be the last we take before we go to public comment.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Callender Anderson very much for being at all these meetings where we discuss the CAPS Commission, and also for all of your hard work with the Divided Communities Project and with the evolving task force on the future of policing and the Racial Equity Task Force. I think she's a very valuable member of our city team and has done really great work. I just want to emphasize that the Future of Policing Task Force is about the future of policing. It's about police. It's about law enforcement. which is fine. We need to look at law enforcement. Law enforcement is going to be with us for a long time. It's, you know, it's needed. The CAPS Commission is about looking at public safety in a much broader view. It recognizes that police are not the only element to public safety. Police can't do it all. We've heard Chief Dekoff said that, you know, they're doing the social worker, they're doing the street outreach because nobody else is doing it. But they're overstretched, they're overburdened. So the CAPS Commission is really looking at other approaches. Why do people commit crimes? Why do people get into trouble with the police? Let's look at, you know, some of those root causes. Not enough mental health services, not enough addiction treatment. You know, maybe racial bias, maybe I don't know, but there are many things that add up to a lack of public safety, that add up to people living here in Bloomington that do not feel safe, even when they're doing no crime at all. And that's what the CAPS Commission is getting at. And so I think it is distinctive from the task force that Ms. Callender Anderson is organizing. And I think it is very valuable to hear voices on the broader issues, voices from marginalized communities on the broader issues of public safety. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to public comment, I do want to point out that there was an amendment that was heard at committee. And the amendment was approved by the committee that would review the existence of the proposed commission after 2 years. Normally, we would take that up before we went to public comment on the ordinance as amended. But I will leave it to the sponsors who also authored the amendment, whether they want to take that up now or hear public comment first. What did the sponsors say? Councilor Piedmont Smith.
I think the public has been very patiently waiting, so let's go to public comment.
I hoped you'd say that. All right, with that, we are going to go now to public comment on ordinance 2020. If you are interested in speaking to this ordinance, please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat. Mr. Lucas will call on you one at a time. You'll have 5 minutes.
First up, we have Lisa Poduka, who should be unmuted and ready to comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi. So my name is Lisa Podolka. I'm a recent graduate of Indiana University. I'm primarily here to speak on the behalf of Amanda Nicky, who is the president and CEO of Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, because unfortunately she was not able to be here at this meeting tonight. So I'm speaking on her behalf. Very briefly first, I would like to speak on my own behalf. So these are my words directed toward Ron Smith, because you are my direct representative because of where I live in Bloomington. And I would like to strongly urge you to support this commission because I think it's the bare minimum of what we can do to lift up underrepresented voices in Bloomington. And that it definitely made me sad to hear you argue about nomenclature as to whether, you know, if we make this a commission, that we have to make all these other things commissions, when this is the issue on the table right now. Please support it. It's the bare minimum of what you can do. And from the feedback, I've been going to these meetings for a while, and from the public feedback, overwhelmingly isn't supportive of it. And I do believe that if you vote no, you will be going against the will of your constituents. All right, those are my words. And now I'm moving on to the statement from Amanda Nicky. These are her words. My name is Amanda Nicky, and I am president and CEO of Mother Hubbard's Cupboard. I'm writing to express Mother Hubbard's Cupboard's support of the establishment of a Community Advisory and Public Safety Commission. As a community organization focused on increasing access to healthy food and building community, we value inclusive spaces and highlighting voices often left out of decision-making. The development of the CAPS Commission gives our community a powerful opportunity to hear the perspectives and ideas of marginalized populations, which can only serve to increase our understanding of public safety and improve the daily experiences of all members. What critical perspectives and creative solutions are we missing out on because we aren't intentionally listening to the expertise of those with lived experience? We all know life in Bloomington is a very different experience depending on income, race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, housing status, ethnicity, and many other factors that are often criminalized. This commission offers a perfect chance to include a variety of experiences in identifying problems and developing solutions. Establishing a commission with this focus shows that Bloomington recognizes the inequities in our community and is ready to make room for those most impacted to lead. I see the development of this commission as a no-brainer. It begs the question of why we as a community wouldn't want to increase our understanding of the variety of perspectives surrounding public safety. On behalf of our patrons and staff, I urge you to support the development of this commission. And that again is from Amanda Nickey, the president and CEO of Mother Hubbard's Cupboard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who is next, Mr. Lucas?
Next up, we have Maquiba Reese, who should be ready to comment.
All right, you'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Maquiba Reese, and I am involved in the community. But before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge that this week is Transgender Week, and also this month is celebrating the rich heritage of Native and Indigenous peoples. So I just want to take a moment and recognize them.
Ms. Reese,
I serve on the Board of Public Safety as a Black woman who, with lived experiences, who do not work for law enforcement, for those that have been spreading false narratives. And I know for a fact that I do sit in a place to hear concerns from many groups as I possibly can. Other board members on the Board of Public Safety are equally or have lived experiences as well. And I would caution individuals to not create false narratives to say that they don't have lived experiences. And then also, if you want to radically change structures, structures must be changed. I was unable to attend the full public board of the full meeting last week that took place due to family member being in the hospital due to COVID and have pneumonia. She's currently recovering. When I turned on, I later learned that Councilmember Piedmont Smith said that on Thursday, quote, "Ms. Reese is against this initiative," quote, close quote. And I want to clearly state on November 18th that is not the case. I did not say that. And I emailed Councilwoman Piedmont Smith afterwards and let her know that that's not what I said. I've always said that it's important for us to hear voices, and it's important for us to hear multiple voices. What I said was that I'm against the structure of this initiative because it didn't include people of color in the beginning in our input. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Lucas.
Next, we have Mark Teller, who should now be ready to comment.
You'll have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Teller. I represent the Bloomington Homeless Coalition and the Rapid Response Team therein. I'm a board member of the Bloomington Homeless Coalition and a director of the Rapid Response Team. One thing that the Rapid Response Team does is we get calls for things that police and EMTs will not respond quickly to or will respond in adverse ways. One of the things that we often see is the homeless being blamed for things, even though there's documented proof that they are not the agitators. The homeless, unfortunately, will be arrested. Another thing is that EMTs often ignore. I am representing the entirety of the Bloomington Homeless Coalition. Many of them could not be here because we don't have the logistics or satellites or technology to unfortunately get everybody on here. Imagine 450 other people right behind me. I'm going to tell you a story about one thing happened with the Bloomington response team. It was mid-August. We received a call that there was a gentleman near Seminary Park on a wheelchair with a bad infection, and he had to go to the hospital. You might say, okay, so call 911. Unfortunately, the first thing that responds when you call 911 to Seminary is the police. They would not call the police. So we responded and we took a look at it. The gentleman, we'll call him T, had a bad infection on his one leg. He's a vet, he was missing a leg. That one leg had a missing, all digits missing off of the foot, and the foot was infected. We asked him why he couldn't go to the hospital. He said he had already been twice in a week and a half. They rejected him, they kicked him out. He wasn't belligerent, he doesn't use drugs, he doesn't do anything except for be homeless. They kicked him out. We took a look at his his foot, and it was the worst infection I have seen in the Western world. I saw maggots turn into flies and fly away on the streets of Bloomington from a foot. After assessing it, we judged with the medics that were there, who were all volunteer first responders, card carrying, just off duty, that there was obviously nothing we could do for him, so we had to take him to some hospital. Calling 911 was, again, not an option. We didn't want to get him arrested for existing. We carted him from seminaries all the way to Bloomington Hospital, IU Health, up that hill, the entire time, getting his story, the tragic story of him being turned away. Again, never was belligerent, just who he is. You might say, well, he didn't have insurance. He had insurance. All of these people have insurance and they were turned away. He couldn't call 911 because he knew that he would be arrested for something. They'd find something on him. He doesn't do drugs. We carted him all the way there, and we stood there staring at the people at Bloomington Hospital, and I saw the hate in their eyes for us having to be there to make sure that they admitted him. I was lucky enough. They only allow one person in with a patient. I was lucky enough to be able to leave. 4 hours later, I got a report back that he was finally admitted. 4 hours later. Maggots, flies. It was then that we decided that this needed to happen more often. We needed more outreach. We needed to let people know that we are here for them in any way, shape, or form. This was in mid-August. We have not heard back from T since. We don't know where he is. We've come to find that something that Bloomington Hospital has done in the past, and
You have 1 minute.
hoping to find out if this is the case. Sometimes they take them and they release them in Martinsville so that they cannot get away back. You can't rent an Uber. You can't get on a Lime scooter. He's lost. We don't know where he is. Oversight on that is crucial. That's a human that we're trying to find right now, okay? There's 4 other stories that I can tell you that play into this. The day that IU PD decided to have 50 or 12 cadets without uniform, but body armor and guns, rummaging all the way through Switchyard Park. We had to get a call for that. We're not going to interfere with police, but they didn't know they were police. They weren't police. They were armed cadets scaring the life out of your citizens.
Your time is up.
Think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teller. Mr. Lucas?
Next up, we have Kai Freeman.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kai Freeman. I am the president of the Black Student Union at Indiana University of Bloomington. And I want to preface this by saying that I want to say that I think this is a beautiful initiative. And I very much do think that we should be extending this conversation of public safety beyond policing. However, the one thing that I have as a pitfall, but not as a pitfall, is looking at what the Black Lives Matter movement very much so has talked about and very much so looked for, is that right now they're protesting, the present state of systems. But upon deeper understanding, they're really critiquing structural issues. And I think with the creation of something structurally, if these voices, very much so diverse voices, were not centered in its creation, it didn't radically do anything to shift the conversation of the power and the authority that these communities have not been provided in decisions being made on the policing of their bodies, their safety, and things of that caliber. Because I know, I represent the constituency of Black students within the IU population, which is 4.9%, which is about, 1,400 or so students there, very much so that they're going to be impacted by these. So I think that it would have been, cooler to see, that type of insight, at the creation of it, to make sure that there are safeguards for these various communities, very much so throughout the entire duration of this process, because I see with the city, there's this learned helplessness on the student side of knowing that the city thinks is not what we dabble within. And then on the city side, it almost seems as if it's, well, the students aren't going to care as much because they're not here as long. But I think, very much so at looking at this and this where it's very centered around BIPOC communities is that structurally, we want to be a part of the conversation, not very much so giving a platform to then speak, because we've been speaking and now people have just started to listen. So I think that if we had the opportunity to truly engage with a more diverse pool of people with looking at structurally how this works, I think that would be super duper dope to see. But I want to very much say that I think that this is very much so a cool initiative. I just think on the very forefront of it, these voices should have been centered in its implementation and its structure foundationally, if that makes sense. So thank you all so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Lucas.
Next up, we have Donielle Bird, who should now be ready to comment.
Ms. Bird, you'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
My name is Donielle Bird, and I'm a social worker in Bloomington. I just want to really thank the sponsors of this ordinance. I do support the ordinance to create this CAPS commission, and I also want to remind the council members that there was a petition that was signed by over 150 people that was submitted to the council members via email and the mayor in September. And as part of that petition, there was support from these 150 people for this commission. I see this as an opportunity to widen the scope of study regarding community safety. It is always good to gather more voices from community members we might not otherwise hear from. I see this as complementary but unique to the other efforts that are already underway to address public safety. This CAPS commission would not undermine any other efforts. But this proposal is an incredible opportunity, again, for community members who have lived experience to build community safety ideas. And community safety transcends policing. Community members can be empowered to envision creative solutions that are community-based. And these community members can identify assets as well as barriers and needs that exist in Bloomington. This work is being done all across the United States. This isn't something new, but it is definitely something that communities are doing to address the harm and safety issues. But by involving these folks, this leads to more effective solutions and avoids those common pitfalls when professionals, however well-intentioned, create interventions that end up being ineffective at best and oppressive at worst. So as a social worker who practiced in the community, oftentimes what I thought people needed, or I thought I knew their experiences, I came to later find out that I actually didn't have the full story or picture and didn't know what these folks really needed and wanted. And so they know best. I learned so much more from the community members that I was supposed to help than they did from me. So we need to listen. And this really cannot be accomplished well by a short-term focus group or a task force. As Beverly Callender Anderson said, this work does take a long time. It takes a long time to develop relationships and to do the research and get the voices involved. So I think that a longer term, and I think the time frame is 2 years here, at least for a review. So I'm not really sure why not a commission. I've heard a lot of folks questioning that, and I'm just really puzzled. I don't know if this upsets the apple cart or what. But I just strongly urge you to vote yes on this very well thought out and planned proposal that has the potential to increase safety for all members of the city of Bloomington. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to our next speaker, Mr. Lucas.
Next up, we have Vox Booker, who should now be unmuted and ready to comment.
You'll have 5 minutes, Mr. Booker. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council, for taking this on and continuing to examine this issue. I have the great pleasure of being a Monroe County Human Rights Commissioner. I chair the county's Affordable Housing Commission. I also work with Hotels for Homeless that was fortunate enough to be a recipient of the Jack Hopkins grant. And I've worked with the United Way as well on some small groups. I've also worked in social service, from managing the emergency homeless shelter to working for behavioral health organizations, a myriad of things. I say this because I want the public and the council to understand that I have a great depth of understanding of what goes on in this community. I also participated in the Bridges Divided Community Project. I say it was kind of a heavy hurt, you know, in the Divided Communities Project. I was disappointed. I did not feel like we were a body that was looking at revolutionary change in any way. I felt like it was another cog in the wheel. Earlier, Ms. Reese spoke. She's a member of the Board of Public Safety. I've attended many a meeting. I'm also find myself at times feeling unrepresented by that body as well. That doesn't mean that they don't have lived experience, that they don't do hard and meaningful work. I believe they do. Last week, I said that this needed to be an all hands on deck approach. I still adamantly believe that. You know, one of the things I did earlier this year before the plague struck was I was also fortunate enough to do training with CJAM on restorative justice and mediation. And one of the things that I learned is sometimes it's not about the thing directly in front of you, it's about the things behind the things and the way that people feel. And I feel like that applies tonight, especially because I hear so much gnashing of teeth about whether or not there should be a full commission, what that means, structural authority. But I have to ask, as a member of a marginalized community, what is the downside of creating a commission? What are we fearful? What is there so much consternation about? Like last week I said, oh, we're not going to create, you know, too much social equity and too much justice. That remains. It's not the burden of the brutalized or the oppressed to correct all the social ills. So yes, I feel like my representatives should move and should be advocating for marginalized communities. I feel like when I look at folks like, you know, Isabel or Matt or Kate, these are the exact reasons why so many people voted for them, is because folks want to see that representation. You know, I've been fortunate enough to know a lot of the council folks fairly well. I feel like most of you are good, dedicated folks, but I'm going to ask you to examine your own hesitancy and if there are ways that you're becoming King's white moderate in this scenario. All people are asking for is to literally create a commission with the approval of the council to
1
just
minute.
speak out their voices. I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't see a downside to this. And I think it's going to take an entire community approach. And I want to live in a community that I can be proud of and that I can feel like my elected officials have acted in the best interests and welfare of the entire community they represent. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Lucas.
Next up, we have Nicole Johnson, who should now be ready to comment.
You'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi. First off, I'd like to thank the authors of this whole thing. It's wonderful. I'd also like to mention that they indeed did go out of their way to communicate with constituents. First of all, my name's Nicole Johnson. Sorry about that. I'll introduce myself. I am on the Bloomington Housing Authority Residents Council. I'm the director of Pigeon Hill Pantry. And I'm also a single mom of 4 kids. And, you know, I can check off the disabled box too if you need me to. However, really what it comes down to, and what really surprises me amongst everything, is these are my takeaways. This is what I wrote down listening to you people. I think this city council is worried we won't be able to perform basic tasks. So that's my first comment that I wrote down. And then I wrote, does Councilperson Sims understand client-led care? Yeah. And then next I wrote down, and this is to echo what Buck just said as well. I think maybe this council is concerned about, what this council is concerned about is what this commission might tell them. And then, yeah, and there was some talk about the public safety and how that's all mayor-led, I believe, or mayor appointed, and that this would, yes, complement that and be all constituent-led and offer some balance. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, and I really feel like everybody's pushing this organization structure. Oh, well, we need to get all these advocacy organizations together that are supposed to help me and help this or, you know, help me and others like me. Let me tell you something. I spend so much of my time filling out those organizations' paperwork and jumping over barriers that you have no idea. You have no idea. You have no idea how many times I have to report every single piece of evidence for every single household member for whatever agency it is this month, because they don't communicate, because that would be too easy. So my point is that you people don't know what it's like. And I'm not saying I'm a spokesperson for everybody, but I definitely can sit here in this meeting and understand that I am dealing with individuals that have no idea what my lived experience is like. They might have a family member, they might have, you know, some contact with someone, so they care and they understand that people are important, but you don't have any idea. You don't. And I'm just gonna say that class is a big separator here in Bloomington. It's huge. And I'm gonna leave it at that because I said all my stuff, and the last meeting and what needed to be quoted was quoted, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Lucas.
Next up, I believe we have Heather Lake, who should now be ready to comment.
You'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hi. I think that this commission is really important. I have a long-term mental illness, and in my lifetime, I've been through a lot of experiences that I don't think most people have been, as far as multiple hospitalizations, been treated really badly by the hospital system, by police, by general authority figures. And it makes you feel unsafe. And then when you're having an emergency, the last people you want to call is like 911, because when I have had a mental health emergency and I've called 911, the BPD has on 2 occasions put me in handcuffs and in the back of a police car and taken me to the ER in handcuffs, which is really humiliating. And what makes that even more unsafe is that now if I am having an urgent need, I'll try to handle it myself instead of reaching out for help. And that's not always the safest thing. And also, I don't think a lot of people realize how much the community is suffering right now individually because of the pandemic, because Centerstone has been closed since April. We can't see anybody. It's really hard to get our checks, and it's just our services have been pretty much cut. And so I just think, since not everybody has been through all those experiences and has that, that there needs to be voices from the disabled community to remind people that we have spent our life having our power taken away. And so we are not in any condition to start task force or any of that. We're just trying to like deal with our lives. And so I really think this is important because you can establish a framework and then people can just go there and talk to people and get their power given back by people who have power. And so I just hope this goes through, and I really appreciate people who are working to push this through. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. We go now to the next commenter, Mr. Lucas.
Next up, we have, I believe, Abby Eng, who should now be ready to comment.
We'll have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, hey. Yes, this is Abby Eng. So first of all, I want to thank everyone who has commented so far. Thanks to everyone for their very thoughtful comments about this ordinance to establish a commission. And I want to be very clear here. I don't think that the commission itself is a bad idea. I do share some reservations that I would like to express in terms of how the commission should move going forward should it pass tonight. And first of all, I want to thank Councilmember Sims for his question about Asian American advocacy groups. Our needs often get overlooked so much, and we are out here for sure. I was a bit disheartened hearing some of the comments about why the planners of this particular ordinance decided not to go with an advocacy or organizational approach with this, because those of us who work in advocacy groups and those of us who work in organizations, we've had a lot of experience in talking to our community members about what our needs are. We have experience doing this outreach, and all of us have been doing this outreach already. Those of you who are in Latino commissions or commissions for the Black Student Union, and myself with my own advocacy groups, we have these conversations. And so I do think it was a misstep to not think about the advocacy organizations more carefully, at least in this initial stage, especially since we are not simply individuals. We all work and operate in our communities. I do have some concerns too about moving forward in terms of who's going to evaluate these applications, who's going to ensure in the application and vetting process itself that this is not going to be a top-down approach, and that it is going to be something that will ensure that will ensure that the voices at the table are not simply white voices, but voices that are also doing this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
Next up, we have Alex Goodlad, who should now be unmuted and ready to comment.
You'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So I want to speak in support of this ordinance and 2020 in particular. And I don't want to, take too much time and say too much because, there's a lot of other people that have said fabulous things, and I'm less in the loop about this than other people here are. But I kind of want to reiterate what Vox said, which is what's the downside? That's the question. And I guess let's look at what a commission in general is supposed to do. It's supposed to it's supposed to serve as a function for a particular voice in government, and trying to advise the government to do stuff. So the question to ask is, because we talk about whether this type of commission is unnecessary and whether it can be done through other avenues. And I guess the question to ask is, what do you have of the voices that this commission is supposed to represent? That, like, is there another commission that does a similar thing? I don't really think there is. I want to keep this, more of a positive comment about about what this ordinance does that's good itself. But I think it'll be hard pressed to find much of a voice in the commissions of the city government, particularly of poor and Black and brown communities and the LGBTQ community. I could go on forever. So I think that there just isn't a downside to this, and I think Susan in particular, that gives this thing a chance, and you'll like it. So thanks.
Thank you. Next up.
Next up, we have Tassie, and I apologize, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, but you should now be unmuted and ready to comment.
Hello? This is Ms. Nyati.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, so sorry. My name is Tassie Gennady, and I'll actually be reading a statement for someone else from Mirabai Kajewicz, and so I'm probably hurting her name as well. So she is a social worker. She said, "I am one of those rare townies born and raised here in Bloomington. I have worked within the social service community in Bloomington for the past 20 years and have been working at a master's level social worker for the past 12 years. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the CAPS Commission, as I think it is an important tool to begin a conversation about how we address racism in policing and address how vulnerable populations, such as people experiencing homelessness, domestic violence, and mental health issues, can get more effective response when in a crisis. We know that racial bias in policing is a problem. We know from data on our own BPD that there is racial bias in the BPD. We know from data on BPD response that they respond to many calls related to social issues that police officers are ill-equipped to address. This combination of realities means that vulnerable people are often not helped by crisis calls to police and are at times harmed when police intervene. We know as a community that we need to begin addressing these issues, and in some ways we have. Hiring social workers to work with BPD, while problematic in some ways, does begin to address the need to have people knowledgeable of issues affecting vulnerable people actually responding to them. However, 3 social workers are not going to change the larger issues of bias and of 911 being a catch-all for vulnerable people who are not getting their needs met in the social welfare structure that is currently in place. The CAPS Commission is not a fully formed solution to these enormous problems, but it is a starting point for focused information gathering. The information that we as a community need to make a genuine effort to tackle these problems should start with a good description of the problem. The best people to give us a good description of this problem are the people who are directly affected, who would be members of the CAPS Commission. With that information, the CAPS Commission may be able to research and suggest alternative models to maintain community safety in Bloomington. There are many models to look at, and communities across the country, from Minnesota to Oregon, are pioneering new approaches to community safety. I don't believe we will see meaningful change in the problems outlined above without a creative and innovative approach to these daunting problems. Don't we owe it to the vulnerable people in our community to start this conversation? Thank you.
Thank you. Next public speaker.
Next up, we have RM, who I believe is Renee Miller, who should now be ready to comment.
You'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
I have a very short statement to make tonight. I just want to say thank you to the council for considering public comments this evening, and I hope you all will vote to pass this ordinance. It will inevitably help people succeed in our community as a whole, far past the status quo that we have right now. And thanks, that's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Yes, next up we have Jana Arthur, who should now be ready to go.
You'll have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear.
Awesome. Yeah, I apologize. I'm a little distracted. I am also working right now, but
Please
I
state your
wanted
name.
to, my name is Jana Arthur.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to amplify everything that I've been hearing for the community members that were speaking on behalf of marginalized populations. And I just want to reiterate and amplify some voices that I am not able to accommodate at this time. We were passing out stuff in seminary and several people wanted to speak at this meeting, but due to technological problems, they were unable to participate. But I agreed to voice the concerns of the people that wanted to speak. And one of the things that a man who has been hanging out at seminary had voiced to me is they were just concerned about the use of discretion by police officers. And he was just sort of elaborating on how certain officers treat him respectfully and other people treat him totally differently. And he was sort of voicing that he wished there was some sort of agency that he could file complaints with. Yeah, and there's just a lot of people that are experiencing complex issues, like other people have talked about when you have mental health issues, as well as substance abuse, and you're trying to survive. I just don't think that the typical methods that we have in place are sufficient to serve our marginalized population. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further public comments, Mr. Lucas? Do we have anybody in the chat or in raising hands?
Yes, I do have a message that came in over the chat that Emily Pike asked me to read on her behalf. And the comment reads as follows: I work at a nonprofit that serves people impacted by homelessness, and I am excited for the potential this commission has. We often see that marginalized people aren't engaged in local government because they do not believe anyone is interested in hearing what they have to say. This makes them feel that systems and officials work against them more than for them. I think any new ways to engage people who aren't used to being heard are steps in the right direction. I think it will take time and creativity to engage more folks, but the right thing to do is start by trying, and a commission seems like a forward step. And that is the end of the comment.
Is that all we
I believe so. I don't see any further hands that have been raised.
One more call I'll put out, another 10 seconds. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to Ordinance 2020? Final call. Please raise your hand or type into the chat. Seeing none, we'll come back to the council. I believe the sponsors have an amendment. Would they like to move the amendment now?
Yes, I move Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would you please describe the amendment?
The amendment adds a section to the ordinance that says that 2 years after the first meeting of the CAPS Commission, the City Council will review the efficacy of the commission to determine whether it shall continue or not.
Is that the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Are there questions for Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2020 for the sponsors? I think I have one. How will you define the date of establishment of the commission? Is it upon the signatures on the legislation or upon the appointment of members?
It's 2 years after the first meeting of the commission.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Is there comment from the administration on the amendment? Ms. Callender-Anderson, did you or somebody else want to weigh in?
I'm sorry. No, we don't have any comment.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no questions, we'll go to the public for comment on the amendment. I will ask you please to restrict your comments to Amendment 1, which would trigger a review of the commission's existence after 2 years. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to Amendment 1? Please raise your hand or type into the chat. Mr. Lucas? I'm going to limit comments to 2 minutes here.
We have Nicole Johnson, who should be ready to comment.
Okay. Please go ahead. She's not unmuted.
I got you. Sorry.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
It's Nicole Johnson again. I just wanted to state that I would like to, reiterate some of the comments that I've heard here, and that commissions take a while to get formed, and that especially considering how slowly this is going right now, if this is any indication of how this will continue, because we all know this is a very important subject and we need to be clear on it, then I would just think that when determining the efficacy in 2 years, that how would that be taken in? You know what I mean? Like, how will you determine? And will that be taken into effect or into account, the effect that the research and everything just takes time?
Thank you for your comment. Is there any other comment on Amendment 1? Final call for comment on Amendment 1 from the public. We'll come back to the council for discussion. Is there any debate on Amendment 1?
Sorry, we did have a late speaker on public
All
comment.
right, last minute comment, public comment, Amendment 1.
We have Vox Booker, who should be ready to comment.
Hello, Council. Thank you once again for extending time to this. I just want to have a quick comment on the amendment. I do think in addressing some of the issues of maybe transparency is the word I want to use, but it's not all encompassing of what I want to say. But some of the concerns about the process, I think either yearly or at the end of the 2-year period, when they go through the evaluation process, that should be done publicly. Perhaps they present a public report as part of the amendment. That way that folks at least see the recommendations publicly that they've made. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on Amendment 1? Seeing none, we'll come back to the council for debate on Amendment 1. Is there any member who would like to speak to Amendment 1? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I just wanted to say that since the ordinance itself adds a section in Bloomington Municipal Code, we would have to go through the same process with committee meetings and then the council meeting and a council vote if we were going to end the commission and take it out of code. So that would be a public process. The second thing I wanted to say is that I won't speak for the co-sponsors, but I myself put forward this amendment as a compromise. It wasn't originally my idea. It was as a compromise to other council members who felt that an unlimited term for the commission was hard to swallow. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments on Amendment 1? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on Amendment 1 to Ordinance 2020.
Okay, Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
and Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
That amendment passes unanimously. We now come back to Ordinance 2020 as amended. Are there follow-up questions from members? And if not, is there debate? Is there anyone who has a comment?
I have a
The ordinance
question.
is amended. Question from Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, President Volin. Let me ask the sponsors, is there in the ordinance a description that the CAPS Commission is not designed to review complaints against the police department? And is there anything, is it a review of force? Is there a review of force built into the CAPS Commission? Is that part of the function that they may or may not do?
Ms. Piedmont Smith, please go ahead.
In the duties of the commission and the goals of the commission, there is no mention whatsoever of oversight of the police department or use of force by law enforcement.
So clarify that for me, if you will. Does that mean that the commission does not review complaints against the police, or
well, the commission doesn't do a lot of things. I mean, it doesn't open up a pizza restaurant on Kirkwood Avenue either, but we're not going to put that into the ordinance. So the domain, the review of the police department, the oversight of the police department is by Indiana State Code, the domain of the Board of Public Safety. Therefore, this commission would not do that.
Thank you. I was seeking some clarity on that.
Thank you. Any other sponsors have a response? If not, we'll go back to second round questions. Anybody else with a question regarding Ordinance 2020 as amended? Seeing none, we'll go to debate. Is there any final comment on Ordinance 2020 as amended? Let's not all go at once. Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. This is a very interesting debate, and I've been all ears, and I really appreciate the committee for hearing this and deliberating about it. I'm of a couple minds on this commission, although I think by and large, I find a great deal of merit in having a means by which we can hear from marginalized community members that otherwise don't have the means to do that. And this gives a process by which we can hear from them. And I think that does it run the risk of duplication? Does it because I mean we've heard the reference to lived experience, which I'm not discounting lived experience. It's very important, and of course, one's lived experience or everyone's lived experience is different. On the other hand, lived experience can be called anecdotal, and we need to develop policy on the basis of not a single lived experience, but I guess a confluence of lived experiences or evidence that then says that we're lacking something, and how should we best address it? So I'm very interested in boards and commissions finding evidence for certain proposals that they would like advanced in terms of policy. And so I think that this commission gives some means by which that can happen. So one's lived experience, for instance, could be replicated by many people who are suffering from homelessness, for instance, and so that information and research should be hopefully available. And I think that having it embedded in the council office gives us staff people that can then do the research and then back up the concerns and the problems that are being experienced by people in the community, that then we can have, take action on. So I think this is a unique enough commission that it's not replicating other commissions that I'm aware of, boards of commissions. And I think that a lot of the people who will be serving on this commission do come to council meetings at times, but they have to do it almost in a reactionary way. That is, that when something comes up, they come and they speak about it. But by then, it's very late in the game. And so this gives maybe a means by which people can formulate, share these experiences, come up with ideas that they can relate to us and others on how to shape public safety so it's in the benefit of everybody. And so I think that this is a worthwhile commission, and I'm willing to support it. And I think the authors and the sponsors for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councilmember Sandberg and then Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. And I would disagree slightly with my colleague, Councilmember Rollo, in that many of the lived experiences that certainly I am aware of in my years of doing social work and being a volunteer and working with many agencies and many individuals for which we are talking about here tonight. Extremely aware of all the issues in the community that are causing distress and that are causing people not to feel safe. That said, what I'm also hearing, which bothers me about the structure of this, is many of the concerns are not related to any function at all that the city council or the city of Bloomington would have jurisdiction over. We do have fiscal oversight over our police department. That is a city department. We do not, however, have any control, responsibility, ability to enact policy that would relate to EMTs, IU health, the lack of mental health providers in our community. That certainly is something we could all look to as an issue related to public safety. So let me be clear. I have no problem hearing from individuals who are struggling in this community. As a social worker with a social work background myself, I am very accustomed to being open and to being responsive to the needs of people who struggle. So any characterization that we're all just a bunch of bureaucrats up here, that I don't know what some of the language was used to say we're just concerned about the apple cart being upset. I look at process. Whose responsibility is it to deal with some of these many heartbreaking examples that we're hearing about in all of these public safety meetings that we're having and in this one tonight? It is my preference and my sincere hope that all the individuals who are here in this Zoom room who have been communicating about the efficacy of this and telling us it's going to be a great idea and we should try it. My concern is about the structure. And what are we going to be able to do unless it does pertain to the Bloomington Police Department? With that, we have other organizations that are well underway under the very professional initiative and leadership of our staff, Beverly Callender Anderson, longtime employee of this city with respect to community and family resources. And we do have a board of public safety, and we do have an administration that cares deeply about public safety. So this is a very difficult no vote because, you know, many of you are casting those of us that don't think this is the best way to go as somehow being callous or not compassionate or not concerned about the plight of people in our community. That could not be further from the truth for all of us on this council. And I can speak for myself with much clarity due to the fact that I am familiar. I'm also concerned about public safety from the other end of the spectrum, and that has to do with the Bloomington Police Department. Many of the things that I have heard in this room, I know are not characteristic of the individuals that I have been speaking with and relating to with respect to the perspective of the Bloomington Police Department. We do need them for our public safety backbone. It is a critical function of any city to have a good working understanding of the difficult jobs they perform, how well they are trained, what their level of morale is right now, which is not good, and the departures that we're seeing in that department due to a number of factors, many of them national. But we are not as able to recruit and retain good officers in this current environment. And that is a part of public safety as well. If I thought that forming this commission would be a step to incorporate that as a part of this discussion as well, I would be much more inclined to support it. Unfortunately, given some of the comments that I have heard, which have been, you know, very critical of the Bloomington Police Department, I'm not sure that that's the best way around this too. So it is with great regret and sadness that I'm going to be voting no on this tonight. And it is not because I don't care about public safety. It is because I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you very much. What I really want to make clear, and I think this has been my position right from the beginning, that I support a great many of the goals and the insights of this proposed CAPS Commission. I've just never been able to wrap my head around the need for it to be a commission. I just want that to be clear. That has been the debate from my standpoint from the beginning. And I'll get to that in just a second. But one thing I do want to comment on, I was asked earlier, or someone singled me out and asked if I understood what client-led care means. I'll just simply say, yes, I do. And I do know what it's like. There was a comment like that. I don't ever try to get personal while we're doing our job as elected officials. But I am one of 3 boys that was raised by a Black grandmother who already had 7 kids, and we were able to go to college. We were able to do some things. We were able to get elected to represent people and share our lived experiences in a forum such as this. So I'm not so sure I appreciate comments, but I'm not so sure I appreciate folks who would single me out to say some things that don't even know me. Now, enough of that. Again, at the beginning of this, when I was approached for this discussion, I made the comment, and as I think about it, I'm not so sure it was the correct comment, and I don't really think it was at the time. But what I said is, I don't believe you can be inclusive by being exclusive. Okay, now that's changed somewhat, but I still kind of maintain that with the formation of this proposal. I brought up the fact that there's, by my count, about 22 advocacy social service organizations. There's probably more. And I'm not even counting all the ones that are on campus that I may be aware of. And I think many of you are as well. And there was a list put up, and yeah, we tried, but they didn't respond. And, you know, some we talked to. I can appreciate that effort. At least one of the sponsors of this commission is a member of the NAACP organization that I am a member of. And it is just beyond me, and with no disrespect to anyone, that to say that was an oversight to contact the oldest and one of the most responsive advocacy groups for African Americans in this town when we're both right there in the same meetings sometimes. So that's, again, you know, I'm not pointing fingers, that this is just the facts. Okay. I always advocate, or since the beginning have advocated, that not against a commission. I don't think it should be, but I've talked about being a task force or a focus group. And yes, and I've been, no, that's just not desirable. That was not acceptable. And there was rationale as to why it shouldn't be one of those groups. And then I think back, and for someone to suggest that a commission would have no city government standing unless it's commissioned, to me, historically, is just not true. The Peak Oil Task Force is what it is. It may not be long-term, it may be focused, but this local government, city council, listened to the recommendations, suggestions, and the research of that group and took that input very seriously. I could say the same thing about the Urban Deer Task Force. So I don't think it minimizes what the input that can be given to this council, to this body, by it not being a commission. Okay, I've talked about social service agencies out in the community. Many of us have worked with those groups. It bothers me when we come up and draw, with all the good intentions of this legislation, it still bothers me when there's a group of folks that are representing a larger group and there's minimal input from those groups we profess to work for and to operate for and to represent. All intentions are fine, and I'm quite sure that at some point we'll get there. But as you heard from some of our other public comments, and it's been noted earlier that the majority of the public comments are in support of this, and I am very happy to hear that. I'm happy for any public comment. But many of the folks that many of us on this council, my colleagues, hear from are not people that make public comments. So that is not a good gauge of, you know, what's acceptable, what's not. It's just a gauge of the folks that commented in that public meeting, which I do respect. But I wouldn't paint that picture to say, you know, because we got this and this many folks and there was that positive, that is what pushes the entire legislation. So again, not to discredit those, but I'm just not real comfortable with that. So all done. It's getting late. I won't be here all night long. My issue was that being a commission. I think we can still do some of the things that they will strive to do if it was a task force just like some of the other task forces that we do or have worked with in this community. And last but not least, with talking about the Divided Community Project and whether council members were involved with that or not, I held my tongue, but one of the things is that I was one of those people that was contacted and said and met with them. And we talked about much more than policing. We talked about the farmers market. We talked about white supremacy. We talked about the climate. We talked about social equity and racial equity. So I think if someone wants to know those things, then simply ask us. Just simply ask me. Ask some of the other folks who made these comments. And then we'll get a lot closer to where we all feel, as opposed to assume or make certain judgments. So thank you. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Further debate on ordinance 2020 as amended. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short since you all already know my views on this. I, as a city council member, there are people that I do not hear from. I mean, most of the people I hear from frequently are middle-class white people, frankly. People active in neighborhood associations, things like that, people who are homeowners. I feel like I need the input of people who are different from that, people who are traditionally excluded from the tables of power in order to make good decisions. Now, I do seek out other opinions and other people when I have major decisions to make at the council. It's not like I just wait for emails to come in. I do try to get those other opinions. But this body, if we create this commission, I think it will be very useful to me and very useful to all of the elected officials in city government when we make decisions about the budget and about public safety, any policies related to public safety. And I want to hear these voices, and I don't think they're going to be represented in the Future of Policing Task Force. The Future of Policing Task Force will include law enforcement. And a lot of people who are from marginalized communities will not feel comfortable telling their stories and sharing their ideas if they're in a room with law enforcement officers or even employees of Bloomington Police Department. The Future Policing Task Force is focused on policing. What we really want to get at is beyond policing. What are other things we can do to improve public safety? And Councilmember Sandberg said that we don't have control over those other things. We control the police department, but we do not control mental health and other aspects of public safety. Well, the city can be a unifier to get people together to improve those areas. I'm not saying the city is going to act alone and set up a mental health clinic or a homeless shelter or something, but the city can get some answers together through this commission and then can work with others in the community like we do on so many other issues. We bring people to the table. We also have structural advantages that other bodies don't have, where we can help further the goals of public safety, even if they are not under our direct purview like the police department is. I did want to mention, Councilmember Sims said that a lot of people who, even though most people who spoke at the public meetings were in favor of the commission, there are a lot of people that just don't speak at public meetings, and I agree with that. Over 150 people signed the petition that we received in September that had as one of its points the creation of a community advisor on public safety commission. So that's a lot of people. If this would be better done as a task force, and if the vote is negative this evening, I hope to see from Councilmember Sims a proposal for a task force to do the same thing. And that's all I'll say for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. further comments from members? Debate on ordinance 2020. Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure. Thank you. First, I just want to say I appreciate the criticisms that I've heard from community members as well as my colleagues. I have and am following up with these individuals, continuing to reflect on that criticism, and I apologize for shortcomings in my approach. I have learned from this, and I will keep working to improve and do better. This legislation proposes to create a structure and formalize a process through which city government and the city council can gather more input on topics of public safety from residents who have been marginalized by our current systems and institutions. And as a matter of policy, the exploration of approaches that reimagine public safety, specifically public safety needs and approaches that are outside the criminal legal system, is not currently being considered by city government in any formal way. No current entity, commission, or proposed entity or commission or task force for that matter is seeking to do so. Many residents, however, including many BIPOC residents, have explicitly asked us to study these topics and consider public policy in this realm of public safety. And I think to do so in a meaningful way, we do need some sort of formalized process to consider and study the policy and research and bring proposals. And I think centering voices of folks who have been marginalized by our systems in bringing us their perspective and making those recommendations is a good approach. Again, I apologize for shortcomings in the initial development of this, and working to continue outreach and redouble my efforts on that front as we continue to work on this. And regardless of the outcome of the vote tonight, that will be true. So I appreciate the extensive community and conversation with colleagues that we've had around this. I know we're all working to do what we think is best for the community in this space. So thank you all.
Thank you. Further comment from council members. Councilmember Scambaluri.
Thank you. And thank you to council members Piedmont Smith and Flaherty and Rosenbarger. As sponsors and authors of this ordinance, your work has sparked a robust and a really important conversation, and I am grateful. First things first, what can we agree on here? I've listened to this conversation not just this evening, but also in 2 public safety committee meetings. And I'm pretty confident that I'm characterizing the entire council correctly when I say that I sense a need to be more intentional and consistent in seeking out and engaging voices that haven't been adequately represented in the past. At least for me, it seems we all share that value. What we've been wrestling with most is the best way to do that. Okay. So how do I think about this issue? Okay. Usually it's my way to think about an issue to ask my questions. Does this proposal do this? Does it accomplish this? So there are 3 questions that have kind of shaped my thinking here. First of all, does this proposed plan bring traditionally underrepresented voices into positions of true influence and decision-making? One of the conversations we had at a public safety committee meeting was the difference between hard power and soft power. It is most important to me to have members of BIPOC communities, to have those who experience disabilities or who have lived experiences that haven't been represented. I'd like to see them on the board of public safety. I'd like to see them on city council. I think that's something that's very important. Next, public safety relies on intersecting and interdependent agencies, law enforcement, EMTs, and municipalities, city, housing, university. Does this proposal take that into account? Okay. We've heard some of this discussed already, and I do tend to focus what we can influence. Yes, we can be perhaps a central point of conversation, but what we can control and shape is based in the city of Bloomington. And most candidly, most of what I have heard has focused on BPD. And I can't help it. I think we have the room to look at something like the county, and IUPD and the Stride Center and other public-private partnerships. And I think we need a mechanism to bring those voices into. Finally, most important, has this proposed response or model been developed in consultation and in collaboration with the communities we hope to engage? And does it reflect how those communities wish to engage around these issues? Ms. Gennady, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, made the point, the best people to give us better understanding of these issues are those with lived experiences and personal insights. In exactly the same way, I think those with such experiences are also in the best position to shape the venue in which we gather those insights. Two comments or two series of comments have been really, really influential in how I think about this. I can't remember which committee meeting it was, but Ms. Reese, I believe, offered the comment, don't just build a table and then invite us as an afterthought. Let us work on building that table with you. And then a second thing was very powerful to me, came from Councilmember Sims, when he reminded us of all the tables that already exist. He spoke about the NCAA, and we've spoken about Bloomington Pride and the Bloomington Homeless Coalition. There are tables that already exist that we haven't tapped, and that's on us. I'm also troubled by a point, and I have to bring this up. It feels to me like it's been suggested, maybe unintentionally, that the only way we would bother to seek out and listen to these voices would be within the context of the commission being proposed here. I've heard words and phrases like a commission would legitimize these voices, and a suggestion, and I want to make sure I get this word right, that including this group in a municipal code would ensure that its work would be ongoing and that its recommendations would be heeded by City Council. Put simply, I don't agree with that characterization. I have sought out and will continue to seek out connections to these communities, and I will continue to listen, regardless of what we call this or don't call this. And I'm guessing that's true of most of my colleagues. I believe a better approach would involve two key elements. First, it would be structured but boundary spanning. It would be sensitive to the intersecting and independent agencies and municipalities that are in play. The Divided Community Project, to me, seems to have great potential in this regard, and particularly now so with the request that Council put forth appointments to the Future of Policing Task Force. Most important of all, I think whatever gets chosen eventually, it involves our reaching out and engaging with communities around tables they themselves have created. At City Council, we appoint members, we appoint a council member to serve in liaison roles to the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation and the Chamber and the County Economic Development Corporation and Downtown Bloomington, Inc. and the Monroe County Convention Center Management Group and other organizations. Couldn't we broaden that perspective, perhaps, in 2021? Provided, of course, that we have the support of the organizations, why couldn't we appoint liaisons to important external groups like the NAACP or the Bloomington Homeless Coalition? Why couldn't we have a liaison to internal groups like the Commission on the Status of Black Males? Toward this end, I've actually asked our council attorney and administrator to research options for how we could formalize or document such plans. Regardless of the outcome of this ordinance, I'll still be urging council to move in that direction. With that, I'll be voting no on this proposal, and if it passes, I will do everything I can to help it succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. I didn't know if you saw my hand a minute ago. Okay, I want to keep this short too because I'm a co-sponsor and I'm voting yes on this. I will say that I am a co-sponsor of this ordinance for many reasons, but I think it really boils down to the fact that so many people have asked us to create something like this. And it isn't new that people have been asking for this. You know, I mean, we heard it tonight, we've heard it in the discussions around this, but we heard it all summer as well in our public safety committee meetings. So I think when so many people are saying we don't feel heard, we don't feel understood, it's important then to figure out how we can make that happen. And I think this commission is a good attempt to do that. I know many council members have some qualms with different parts of it. I think I actually really hate the saying, like, let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But I think in this case, it might apply that this is something that we can try, and we can put that 2-year limit on it. It would be the only commission, I think, created with a deadline and a review. But, you know, it's, to me, the risk in trying this is close to none. So it, you know, I mean, council staff, there was also the issue with council staff. They're saying they have time for this. It can fit right in their daily responsibilities. So I think, just like, for me, it's hard to get over the why not. I agree with what Ms. Johnson said tonight. I have no idea what other people experience, and I have no idea what other people need to feel safe here, but I want to know. And one reason I ran for council is because, you know, I attended a lot of council meetings, and I commented, and I saw how exhausting that can be and how much time that can take. I mean, it's following what's happening, right? It's like knowing when you need to be there. It's mostly listening to other issues come up before you're there to speak, right? It's just a lot of time. And I think we have to encourage more engagement from residents, and especially those folks who are not normally involved. And that's what I think this commission is doing. Tonight, we had people commenting who have never commented before, and I think that's really encouraging. So I think this is the right thing to do. I think the point here, right, is to bring in people with unique experiences and to inform our work moving forward. I kind of touched on this, but I really can't get over the question so many people asked tonight. What's the harm in creating this commission? What's the downside? We have a parking commission because parking in Bloomington continues to be a challenge. We have a commission on sustainability because climate change isn't going away. And it's unfortunate to say it, but other things that aren't going away are homelessness and mental health issues and racism and addiction issues. And so to me, the idea that we would create a finite task force, or I don't like to say the phrase focus group, but something like that for issues that are so deeply ingrained, right? And that have been challenges for so long. I mean, I just think we need something as substantial as we can get here, and this is that mechanism. So I am looking forward to hopefully this commission passing and letting folks get involved in a way that they've never been involved before, and letting that inform us about our processes moving forward. What do we need to budget for? You know, I don't agree that there's nothing we can do with these recommendations. You know, we do have control over a lot here. We control the budget, and I think this is going to be very useful for us. So I appreciate everyone who worked on this. Comments, honestly, both positive and negative. I think that we've learned a lot tonight, and this can inform the commission moving forward. So I appreciate all the work. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
I've given this, I've really thought hard about this for the last few weeks. And my reticence in it was that I guess I was hung up on the structure of a commission. But I have to say that all the goals of it are really good. And it's a broad discussion, and it will develop into an inclusive commission. So through the force of my my colleagues and the public comment, I've decided to support the commission and vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess it's my turn. There are a couple of debates here. One about centering voices of the marginalized, the other about the theoretical approach to solving problems. Do we do it top down or bottom up? A task force is by definition top down. Somebody appoints it, somebody says there's going to be a task force. But I mean, that is the definition of the executive branch of government. This is what we expect the executive branch to do, is they do things top down. They are the administration. They carry out the laws. It's what it's supposed to be. And there's nothing inherently problematic about that. We need the executive. The legislative branch's role, though, must balance the top down with the bottom up. We can't ignore the what's the word? The imperatives of the administration. But of course, we're elected by the people, and so we speak for individual voices. Now, this ordinance is not even proposing a commission that officials be a part of. It's advisory, as many other commissions are. The Parking Commission that Councilmember Rosenbarger mentioned is advisory. The Hispanic and Latino Affairs Commission is advisory. You know, if anything, most of our commissions do not have statutory authority to do anything. So the Parking Commission is a good thing to talk about. I authored it. It was the last commission created by the council 4 years ago this month. The ordinance I wrote defined the topic. It was take up policy regarding how to regulate cars once they have stopped moving. When cars are moving, it's Traffic Commission or Bike and Ped Safety Commission. This is what happens when they're standing still, where they should go, how much they should pay to park. But after that definition, it was up to the Parking Commission to decide policy advice. I didn't have to propose that commission. District 6 is far and away the district most affected by parking. It's the #1 issue in my district. It always has been. I could have just continued to do what I'd been doing for years before that, advance parking policy on my own. And I did my share of it. But the city's parking policies now are better for having brought multiple voices to the table, not just my own. Before the Parking Commission, the last new commission to be created was Hispanic and Latino Affairs in 2010. Let no one say that the council creates commissions often or willy-nilly. So how did the Parking Commission organize? We spent the first 3 meetings in 2017 figuring out how we should do business, how we should discuss items, how long we should meet, when, and how often. We did meet at a table in the hooker room, but we built the notional table in the first few meetings. In the same way, no one should expect that the CAPS Commission should be formed fully with the ordinance. Making the commission itself is simply a statement that this council thinks intersectionality and public safety are important enough to be considered together on a regular basis so as to be given permanent standing to think about those things together. But a commission is its commissioners. Council's role here is to endorse the bringing together of all the social service organizations, the formal and informal groups of interest, and nothing more. The commissioners, the people of the commission, are going to create the commission. The commissioners are going to build the table once they start meeting. So the sponsors are not actually done yet. Assuming that this passes, the real judgment should be reserved for who should sit in those 11 seats. The commission is only going to be as beneficial as its initial members. The consultation and the collaboration comes now, after this ordinance is passed, with the appointment process. And here's the thing. In my experience, there's been maybe once or twice in 16, 17 years that I've served on council where there was any question about a member of a board or commission, about any question when one was nominated, whether they were debated. It almost never happens. Usually council members appoint members with zero input from the public and with zero debate. We all but rubber stamp board and commission appointments. I predict that the seats on this commission are going to be the most closely watched appointments in the history of the city's boards and commissions. And the sponsors have an obligation. I mean, I can fault them for not having reached out to organizations before now. Councilmember Sims was not wrong to fault them for it, but the real action comes now. Will we all pay attention to who will sit on this commission? Because its success or failure depends on who sits in it first. So I am happy to support it because it's nothing more than an empty vessel. And those people who do not apply to the commission or who do not get appointed to the commission, but who find its work important, their attendance, their presence, their participation, along with the commissioners, is just as crucial. It's not, none of this is excluding anybody from conversation, but I'm counting on those 11 people to guide me and to guide the rest of us, because I don't know what to do about all the issues that have been brought up tonight. I don't pretend to know. I do know that we need help, we need advice to do it. And this mechanism is simply put the way it's done. We have no other mechanism as a council. We have no more powerful mechanism, certainly, than a commission. So I believe that it's important. I'll be voting yes tonight on it. Is there anyone who has a follow-up comment on Ordinance 2020 as amended? Second call for second comments. Final call. Will the clerk please call the roll on Ordinance 2020 as amended?
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
No.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambolari,
No.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
No.
Volin,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
By my count, the motion passes 6-3. The ordinance is adopted. We go now to, sorry, I'm finding my agenda here. We can now go to legislation for first reading. Madam Parliamentarian.
I move that ordinance 20-29 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Sorry. Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambolari,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
That motion carries. Will the clerk please read?
Yes. Ordinance 2029 to amend Title I General Provisions of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding amending Chapter 1.08 to harmonize the design of the city logo and city seal. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance repeals and replaces Bloomington Municipal Code Chapter 1.08 entitled City Seal to adopt a new city seal that harmonizes the designs of the city logo and city seal.
It also creates standards for the use of the city seal, prohibits unauthorized use of the city seal, and prescribes penalties for violations of the chapter.
Thank you. I had intended to refer this to the administration committee, and we had scheduled a meeting of that committee to meet immediately after this meeting as per our annual schedule that was passed last year. However, this meeting has gone past the legal start time for committees on Wednesday nights, 9:45. And so rather than refer it to a committee that would meet tonight, I mean, I'm taking up matters of schedule right now. I'm going to propose that we cancel the admin committee meeting for tonight and refer it to the next opportunity for a committee meeting, which would be December 9th. Mr. Lucas, is that does that need to be a motion, or can I simply make that declaration?
With the council suspension of the rules that was first adopted back in March and then extended in September, the council authorized the president to make a preliminary referral of legislation to a committee, subject to any different referral the council wanted to make. So, okay. Assuming the council doesn't have a different preference, then that referral is sufficient, and the start time of the committee meetings on September the 9th may depend on the other legislation that's coming forward. So I don't know.
December the 9th, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, December the 9th. Okay. So I don't know that the start time will be able to be set this evening, but unless the council has a preference for a different committee referral, I believe your announcement suffices.
Okay, so I will simply say that I'm going to move that it be referred to an admin committee meeting on December 9th, time to be announced. Does anyone have a different motion for this first reading? Last call. Seeing none, that's what we'll do. And so during council schedule, we'll move to cancel that meeting for tonight. All right, we go now to the second period of public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an item that was not on tonight's agenda and who has not already spoken at public comment? You have an opportunity to do so now. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type into the chat, and Mr. Lucas will call on you.
I believe I first saw Greg Alexander raise his hand. He should now be ready to comment.
Please go ahead. Again, please keep in mind that this is to be on an item that was not on tonight's agenda. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I'm Greg Alexander. Sorry to waste your time at such a late hour, but I just wanted to bring your attention. I was at the ribbon cutting for the new protected bike lane on Adams Street between Kirkwood and 3rd. And I really, I wouldn't have prioritized that for the first protected bike lane, but I'm excited that there is one, and the engineering details on that project, it's amazing. It is just a dramatic improvement from how we used to do business. But while I was at the ribbon cutting ceremony, just in that brief time that I was standing there, I saw a pedestrian walk by, and that's significant to me because the actual original purpose for the project, what put it on the schedule, was to install that sidewalk on the east side of the street there by the cemetery. And that sidewalk has been missing for decades. And there had been a trail previously where people had been walking in the grass, which is sometimes mud and sometimes forces you into the street and so on. And it was just an undergraduate woman walking on the sidewalk. I don't think she realized that the sidewalk was brand new. I think she had moved in and the sidewalk had been built just about a month before she moved into the apartments there. And it's just absolutely essential that we have these sidewalks. You just have to take them for granted. And so it's great that we have that, but we have so many places that are still missing sidewalks, and it's not sexy. It's not the mayor's not gonna have a ribbon cutting for a sidewalk, would be my guess. But it's such a valuable service. People really take it for granted and need sidewalks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Yes, next up we have Andrew Gunther, who should now be ready to comment.
Please go ahead.
Thank you to council members for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Andrew Gunther, and I'm here this evening as a private citizen. I'm sorry that this comment is coming so late in the evening, but I thank all of you for sticking it out and for working for our community day in and day out through this pandemic. I'm here to speak tonight about recent events at the City Council Transportation Committee that occurred last night, where the Transportation Committee, made up of council members Rosenbarger, Boland, Smith, and Piedmont Smith, were choosing applicants to interview for 2 open spots on the Public Transportation Corporation Board of Directors. I want to make it crystal clear that I am not giving public comment tonight because I feel scorned by their decision not to choose me for interviews. I am more than happy in my current role as chairman of the Environmental Commission. I applied for the Bloomington Transit Board of Directors because I believed a few things, among them that our public transit system is critical to our health as a community, that my experience in environmental policy could perhaps aid the board, and that it is important that our bus board be filled with members who not only use the bus system, but depend on it. As someone who does not drive due to a disability, I'm intimately familiar with the workings of our bus system, the challenges facing the same, and the needs of our most vulnerable residents when it comes to public transit. I'm here tonight because I am alarmed by the method and reasoning used to dismiss my application to the board in question. It was reported by the B Square Beacon this evening that the council member Piedmont Smith indicated that she does not care about the legal aspects of my application, but that she does not believe that someone who has sued the city should be able to participate in our democratic system of boards and commissions. She pretty bluntly indicated during the meeting that she is upset that I would dare to question the city of Bloomington, and that as a result, she believes I should be barred from the process entirely. Other candidates for these positions this evening have begun announcing they will drop from consideration unless I'm interviewed. I am not here to encourage that or to make those threats tonight. I want those people to interview. I mention it only to illustrate that there is outrage at the words and actions of Councilmember Piedmont Smith in particular. I am here because I believe that Councilmember Piedmont Smith's attitude and disdain towards myself and anyone else who dares to oppose the city is dangerous to our democratic system. Her insistence on blocking members of the public with whom she disagrees from public discourse and participation rings true of some occupants of the White House, but is not behavior befitting of a member of our city council. And the other 3 members of this committee approved this line of reasoning as well. The Washington Post says that democracy dies in darkness, and I believe the comments and actions of Councilmember Piedmont Smith cast a dark shadow indeed over the institution that is our city council. I encourage the city legal department to look into this case carefully before proceeding forward with actions that may taint the reputation of this body. As one member of the public put it recently, quote, "Speaking truth to power often goes through a courtroom," end quote. And our citizens of all political affiliations should not be punished for speaking truth to power, nor should they be scorned for fighting for what they believe is a correct interpretation of Indiana code and law. It is not a crime to push your government to follow the rules. Councilmember Piedmont Smith may believe that the government should go unchallenged and unquestioned, but that is antithetical to the democracy and transparency of our community. Additionally, as an aside, the Public Transportation Corporation Board of Directors is a partisan board under Indiana code, meaning at this time only one Democrat can be appointed to the board. We should not be repeating the mistakes of the past that are already being adjudicated before the courts. The city council must learn from the previous failures of the city administration. I encourage you all to think carefully before making any rash decisions that could adversely affect this body. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and I hope that you all realize the error of this line of reasoning. I do not necessarily want you to reevaluate my application. Rather, I want you to reevaluate the reasons why you dismiss certain applications over others. Democracy of our community depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other further public comments, Mr. Lucas?
Yes, next up we have Alex Goodlad.
Okay, you'll have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Hello. So I don't want to speak on any, item in particular or any like different specific political thing, but just kind of the nature of the, I guess, general political discussion that we're having. And I promise to be brief, which is that I think that for everybody, and that includes, council members and, people in the public comment section, like in general, we should think about, when it's okay to play hardball or like bash people. And when you want to have sort of a discussion, I don't want to like tone police anybody or anything of that nature. I think that there's some situations where you do want to call people out. I'm all for it. I've kind of made my gig at local politics doing that sort of thing. So I'd be a hypocrite to denounce all call outs. But I think we should really, when we propose items on the agenda, such as ones that we're recently considered and voted for. I think we have to be careful not to just attack somebody because they disagree with us, and we should consider why they disagree with us. And I think that the onus is on us as especially as people of privilege, and I speak for myself here. I think of myself as a person of privilege, to listen to people who have lived experiences and do experience marginalization of some sort that don't necessarily agree with you. And I think that's important to just be listening and introspective, and not just on the offense. And even with I have my issues with BPD, but I'm willing to listen to data-driven arguments and that sort of thing. And I could go in on them too, but I think we should think about it. And that's all I got to say. Thanks everybody for listening, and I think we have a bright future ahead of us.
Thank you. Further public comment, Mr. Lucas?
I don't believe so, no.
Last call for second public comment. Seeing none, we go now to matters of council schedule. So with the referral of the City Seal Ordinance 2029 to December 9th, there is no reason to hold the admin committee meeting tonight. I'll entertain a motion to cancel the admin committee to follow immediately.
So moved.
Needs a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to cancel the admin committee meeting of tonight? Hello, Madam Clerk. I know it's late.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was typing and my hands didn't catch up. So Councilman Morello,
Yes.
Valori,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Bolin,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
That meeting is canceled. Mr. Lucas, what lies ahead that's looming on the horizon for us?
Just a reminder that the council will not be meeting next week due to the Thanksgiving holiday, and that the next council meeting will be that meeting on December the 2nd. And also for interested members of the public, the council sidewalk committee is finalizing a date for its first meeting of the year. A tentative date that we will confirm with an official notice, I believe, is December the 3rd, which is a Thursday. So for folks interested in that committee's work, stay tuned. You should be getting a date relatively soon for that first meeting coming up. So those are the only items coming up on the council's horizon. There are only 3 meetings left of the council before the end of the year, before council goes on winter recess. So
You mean 3 meeting nights, because the 9th will be probably multiple committee meetings.
correct. Three more Wednesdays of meetings for the council. So
Very good. Any questions? Any final announcements from members? If not, I'll entertain a voice vote on a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Have a safe holiday. Please pay attention to all mask ordinances. Please wear a mask. We'll see you in December.